Put down the fork, hand off the remote. Let's settle this on the field.
Altair, Altair, liquid Brun, Vanilla Dunes.
Man, this thing really smells terrible. And welcome into the fragrance showdown you didn't know you needed, the Battle of the Bruns. Well, last winter, Parfums de Marly Althair was all the rage. And for good reason. It's a boozy, masculine vanilla that seemed at the time pretty unique. And as things happen in this fragrance space, when something becomes really popular, well, then we get a whole bunch of clones. So today, we're going to take a look at some of the more popular Altair clones. We're going to put them up head to head with the original, see who comes out on top. Now, let's take a look at our starting lineup. At quarterback, we got French Avenue's Liquid Brun. Arguably the most popular of all the schmoops out there. Starting at running back, rookie sensation Khadlaj Island Vanilla Dunes. At wide receiver, Demarage Voltaire. At tight end, we've got the Queen's Bear, Brun. And starting at center, Arabiat Prestige, Lutfa Light in the Heart. I think that's how you say it. Starting at left tackle, Anash Parfums, Athen. So it's my goal to give you guys the most upfront, honest information I can so you can make an informed decision with your next purchase. But in order to do that, I need to address some bias that may be present. I think it's important for you as a consumer to know that a few of these fragrances were gifted to me, a few I purchased on my own. And that can have some effect on how I feel about the fragrance individually. So we'll keep that in mind. I'll bring it up when and where it's important. Now, before we get ahead of ourselves, let's talk a little bit about Altair. Now, as you can see, I don't own a full bottle, and to be completely honest with you, I'm not the biggest fan of Altair. To me, it's a little harsh in the opening and just not a huge vanilla guy, but it's not bad. But shout out to my guy Corey at Lone Star Decants. That's where I picked this up at. Pretty good price. To me, Altair just wasn't full bottle worthy. Let's talk about our contenders a little bit. We got Demarage Voltaire, we got Anash Parfums Athen, Khadlaj Island Vanilla Dunes, Queen's Bear Brun, French Avenue's Liquid Brun, and then Arabiat Prestige Lutfa Light in the Heart. So we're going to compare all these together, talk about the longevity, the opening, how close it is to the original, and overall price, value, etc. We're going to really break these down, get into them, and see if any of these are serious contenders. Now, starting with the Altair, this was actually released in 2023. It's a sweet, spicy, masculine, boozy vanilla fragrance that overall is pretty good. Seems to be a bit of a compliment getter, but it does run anywhere $200 to $300 a bottle, and that's at discounters. Now, it was perfumed by Elias Amenidis and Hamed Kashani. I'm not very familiar with either one of those perfumers, but it's easy to say this thing's been a pretty big hit, especially in the wintertime. Now, obviously, we got to start with smelling the original. Right off the bat, sweet, spicy, boozy. Obviously, lots of vanilla in there. This is a nice fragrance. Just because it's not for me doesn't mean it's not a quality fragrance. To be honest with you, I remember the opening of this being a lot more harsh, but maybe now that I've had it for a while, it doesn't seem that bad. So let's start with comparing the opening. First up, the Demarage Voltaire. Very similar. I'd give it like a 7.5 out of 10 compared to the original. It's close, but there's something in there that's just a little bit off. Almost a little bit of a twist to the sweetness that makes it slightly different, but still close. You can still tell what it's trying to be. Now, next up, one that's not often talked about, and that is Anash Parfums Athen. Once again, pretty close in the opening, like 7.5 to 8 out of 10. Getting a little bit closer as it dries down, probably more like an 8, slightly closer than the Demarage. All right, next up, Khadlaj Vanilla Dunes. Very similar to the other two. This is very close in the opening, but all three of them seem like they're missing just a little something. This, once again, like a 7.5 to 8 out of 10 with the opening. Next, Liquid Brun. I'd say so far the Liquid Brun is winning in the opening category. This is more like an 8.5 out of 10 in terms of just the opening notes. Now from the Queen's Bear, the Brun. Now, don't be scared off by this bottle. Blake and Mandy over the Queen's Bear have really upgraded all their packaging. This is one of the OGs. This is like a one of one. Okay, maybe even slightly closer than the Liquid Brun. More like an 8.75 out of 10 with the opening. And then last but certainly not least, the Arabiat Prestige. Now, to be fair, I had read that this is more of a mix between like a Grand Soir and an Altair and not just a straight up Altair clone or schmoop. Now, as you can see, I don't have a full bottle. This is a decant given to me by my buddy Sam. And yeah, I can definitely pick up some of the Grand Soir amber notes in there. A lot smoother. I mean, this is maybe like a 6 to 6.5 in terms of closeness to the opening of the Altair. So, but still very good. Certainly not as close. So far with the opening, the leaders are definitely the Liquid Brun and the Blake Brun. Seems pretty darn close to the opening. De Mirage, the Athen, and the Vanilla Dunes are still close, still good, but something's just a tiny bit off with the sweetness. So next up, we're gonna have to take a little break, let them dry down. We'll come back to it, see how things smell after that opening's gone. So give me a minute. All right, now we're back. Time for the dry down challenge. So I've let these strips sit for about 15 minutes or so, went back, re-sniffed them. Let's talk about them, let's see where we're at. So first off, the Arabiat Prestige really does smell like it's some type of a blend between Grand Soir and Altair. And for me, I really like that blend because I'm not a huge Altair fan. But to be fair, if you're looking for more of a one-to-one style Altair clone, this probably isn't for you. You're like me and you think that Altair is a little too harsh, a little too boozy, then this may be one you want to look into. This personally is maybe my favorite out of all of them, but I'm not an Altair guy, so I probably just need to put my butt back on the bench where I belong. Okay, so now that we have dried down a little bit, things are kind of concentrated, we can get a better idea of how these things are performing. So what made the Liquid Brun and the Blake Brun so close in the opening has kind of started to cause it to pull away a little bit as we've dried down. The kind of harsh, boozy notes that are there in the opening have kind of stayed here, but have faded on the Altair, and the Altair is a little bit smoother. Now, these other three that were not as close in the opening seem to be a lot closer in the dry down. So the De Mirage, the Athen, and the Khadlaj Vanilla Dunes. I think at this point, I'm gonna take the Arabiat Prestige, put him back on the bench where I belong, and I don't know that it's fair to continue to compare it to the Altair anymore, since this is obviously some type of like blend or hybrid. Really good on its own and definitely worth checking out if you like Grand Soir and you like Altair, but not fair to this little guy to put him up against these giants in terms of a one-to-one situation. So we're gonna sit him out. So with that, we've reached halftime. We've talked about the opening, we've talked about the dry down. Now I think after the halftime show, let's talk about presentation. So let's start with the De Mirage. Overall, the packaging is kind of simple, elegant, classic, not trying to do too much, not too flashy. They do have nice pressurized atomizers. Doesn't have a magnetic cap, but from what I understand, some of the newer releases will have it. Overall, presentation-wise, like a 7.5 out of 10. Nothing wrong about it at all, but not terribly eye-catching either. Nice, heavy, solid bottles. Overall, very good. Now, let's move on to the A-Nash Athen. Now this is obviously like a bottle that's trying to look a lot more like Xerjoff, but in a bad dollar store kind of way. I'm not sure why you would kind of clone Altair, but then make a bottle that looks like Xerjoff. It's a little bit confusing. I've had people a handful of times on my live stream ask me what Xerjoff this was when it's sitting in the background. But the outer packaging was okay, pretty nice. Overall, not bad. I'm gonna give it, just because of the weird look of the bottle and the non-pressurized atomizer, I'm gonna say like a 7 out of 10. Not as good as the others. Now let's move on to the Liquid Brun French Avenue. Not really a pressurized atomizer, but it's not bad. The box and packaging it came in is actually pretty cool, kind of thick, solid. It's got like a magnetic lid to it, but let's talk about this bottle. I'm not sure, this fragrance is pretty nice, really close to the original, but I don't know why you would make this look like some type of a parking cone that somebody pooped on, with this strange jewel here in the front and this kind of weird plastic lid. I feel like they could have done a lot better. It's a nice fragrance with a really terrible bottle, but yet nice packaging. I would give this like a 6 out of 10 on presentation, and atomizer is okay. So not great. Definitely my least favorite bottle out of all of these. It's not eye-catching, it's not appealing. This is not a centerpiece or a conversation piece by any means, other than people might ask why you have a brown parking cone in your fragrance collection. All right, next up, the Queen's Bear. Now, like I said, this is one of the original bottles, like a one of one, so shout out to my guy Blake or the Queen's Bear for this. Their newer bottles, quite a bit nicer, crazy nice atomizers, thick glass bottles. I would give it like, overall like a 7.25 out of 10. So it's not really fair to show you guys this one because the other ones are way better, but presentation is now pretty solid on them. Now let's talk about Khadlaj Island Vanilla Dunes. So pressurized atomizer, which we all love, right? This bottle has this kind of brown to black ombre thing going on. The bottle's not bad, but it also is not that great. It definitely, I mean, it kind of has a bit of a cheap look. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not a huge fan. I like the atomizer. I like the box that it came in. It's pretty nice. The scent's fantastic, but we're not talking about that. It's not bad. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. It could certainly be better, but it could certainly be worse. Overall, in terms of the presentation, I'm kind of a simple guy. I'd probably just take the De Mirage. I think they win the whole presentation category. It's nice, classic, simple, pressurized atomizer. I like the packaging that it came in. Overall, I'm good with that. Let's take a quick commercial break. We'll come back, talk about price, and see if we've got an overall winner. All right, so now that we're back into the fourth quarter, let's talk about price. Now, Altair runs anywhere from like $200 to $300, depending on where you're picking it up at, potential sales that might be going on, etc. Now, most of these are about the same price. The Vanilla Dunes, Liquid Brun, and the De Mirage all run right around $35 or so, maybe upwards of $40, maybe down closer to $30, depending on a sale or coupons going on. So those are all pretty similar. The Anash Parfums Athen runs about more like $55 to $60, which I think for something that's not very well known with kind of a questionable bottle, that price is a little heavy for this. Overall, it's a good fragrance, but I think that price is going to be hard to get people to go for when you've got things like this that are going for $35 to $40. All right, and then finally, the Queensberry Blake Brun runs about $65 or so for the smaller bottle, so also kind of more up in that slightly more expensive price range with the Anash. So price-wise, it's going to be a tie between the Liquid Brun, the Vanilla Dunes, and the De Mirage. All right, so let's try to close this thing out. It's been a long video, a lot of fragrances, a lot of sprays. Let's see if we can find ourselves some champions. So let's go back to the Rabiat Prestige, the Lutfa Light in the Heart. Now, like I said, this is probably my favorite out of all of them because it's kind of a Grand Soir blend, and I'm not a huge Altair fan. So something definitely worth looking into, but it's been kind of disqualified because it's really not fair to this fragrance to be compared to these others. But overall, I really like it, and I would give it like a 7.5 out of 10. Not sure on the price on it, but this is something I would certainly consider getting a full bottle of. All right, so let's start with the De Mirage. Price is good, right around $35 to $40. Presentation's solid, longevity's good. Now that it's dried down, I'll be honest with you, all these have been pretty similar to Altair, but at the same time, not that close. None of these are one-to-ones. Those don't exist, but these are all close. Anash by Athen is really nice and smooth. This is one of my favorites kind of out of this whole group here. The downside to it, I don't think that the price is appropriate when you've got other options like this that are almost half price, but longevity-wise, it's kept up with the others. It's just a little bit pricey, and I could do without the bottle. Now let's talk about the Vanilla Dunes. Like we had mentioned earlier, the opening wasn't quite as close. The dry down got closer. So far, it's held up longevity-wise. Price is good. Presentation's okay-ish. Altogether, not bad. Blake Brun, a little bit pricier. The opening was really close, really solid. Longevity's good. Presentation on newer bottles is great. Price is a little bit up there, but overall, once again, a pretty nice schmoop. Now, last up, let's talk about French Avenue's Liquid Brun. Hands down, the most popular and talked about schmoop compared to Altair. Price is good. Scent is good. It matches up pretty darn close. Lasts quite a while. Overall, not bad. If they could just fix the atomizer in the bottle, I think this thing would be a beast, which, let's be honest, it kind of already is. This is the one that gets talked about all the time. I get asked about it all the time. So in conclusion, is there a champion out of all of these? No, I don't think so. They all have some good things about them. They all have some bad things about them. And it really may come down to personal preference or personal budget. If you need to save some dough, these three here are probably going to be the ones to go with. If you're not as worried about price, these are definitely solid too. Is there one out of these that I wouldn't pick? No, not necessarily. So in conclusion, these are all really nice fragrances. They're all pretty affordable. They're pretty close matches. They last quite a while. I think you'd be happy going with any. But in the end, Altair still wins by like 2 or 3 touchdowns. This has outlasted all of them. The scent profile, I just overall feel is better. And I don't think that any of these are really all that close to this. They're close, but in like an 85% range. So if you really love Altair, unfortunately, you're just gonna have to buck up the money and get the real thing. But living in the real world where most of us don't have $200 or $300 for a bottle of smelly water, then you're perfectly fine spending $30, $40, $50 on these. And unless you're smelling them right next to one another, you're never gonna know the difference. These are all fine fragrances. I'm probably gonna personally lean a little bit more towards the Queen's Bear because I'm good friends with Blake, and Day Mirage because they're both made in America, which I love. No offense to these other fragrances, but go America. I know there's a handful of fragrances out there that are also Altair dupes that I didn't talk about. These are just the ones I had in the collection. So if you got questions, you got concerns, let me know. You disagree with my findings, let me know too. And also maybe check out that Arabiat Prestige fragrance. It's pretty nice. It was left as light in the heart. And really, that's kind of my favorite out of all of them. But till next time, hope you guys have a happy Thanksgiving. Save money, smell better.